Hello, I'm Ira Harkavy, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to the University of Pennsylvania and to the Netter Center for Community Partnerships 25th Anniversary Conference, Higher Education, Community Partnerships for Democracy and Social Change. It is a great pleasure to see many good friends and colleagues who have done so much to develop and advance the higher education, democratic, civic, and community engagement movement. It is also a pleasure to see many new friends and colleagues in the audience. Thank you for taking time from your busy schedules to attend this conference. My Netter Center colleagues and I are enormously pleased and, quite frankly, a bit overwhelmed that over 550 individuals from approximately 95 colleges and universities and 110 local, national, and global organizations, including colleagues from across the United States and from Australia, England, France, Northern Ireland, Pakistan, South Africa, Spain, and Sweden, have come here to meet and to learn together. Thank you. Thank you. This conference is clearly not just a celebration of the Netter Center's 25th anniversary. It is also a celebration of the accomplishments of a global movement. The enthusiastic response to a meeting on higher education community partnerships is indeed an indicator of how far this movement has advanced over the past 25 years. It is also an indicator of our collective recognition that now is a time when much, much more has to be done. Martin Luther King Jr. used the phrase, "the fierce urgency of now," and called for immediate, vigorous, and positive action to end segregation and the unequal treatment of African Americans. Vigorous and positive action is also required at this time to combat increasing intolerance, racism, anti-Semitism, and xenophobia, as well as attacks on science, knowledge, and democracy itself. In particular, universities throughout the world have an increasing responsibility to contribute to the advancement of knowledge and the improvement of the human condition, which includes contributing to creating and sustaining genuinely fair, decent, tolerant, diverse, and just democratic societies. The importance, indeed the centrality, of higher education has never been clearer. Yet, its promise, as we all know, is far from being realized. Jane Addams, the activist, feminist founder of Hull House Settlement in Chicago's poverty-stricken immigrant 19th Ward neighborhood, identified a reason, in fact, identified a primary reason that colleges and universities in the United States have failed to do what they need to do. They simply have forgotten their true purpose. In 1899, she wrote, "As the college changed from teaching theology to teaching secular knowledge, the test of its success should have shifted from the power to save men's souls to the power to adjust them in healthful relations to nature and their fellow men. But the college failed to do this and made the test of its success the mere collecting and disseminating of knowledge, elevating the means into an end, and falling in love with its own achievements." Adams' belief about the social purposes of learning has deep historical roots. Some 300 years earlier, at the turn of the 17th century, Francis Bacon famously argued that knowledge is power for the relief of man's estate, for the progressive, continued betterment of the human condition. Benjamin Franklin, an ardent Baconian and Penn's illustrious founder, took the ideas of the great philosopher of science even further. In 1749, his proposals relating to the education of youth in Pennsylvania Franklin identified an inclination joined with an ability to serve as the great aim and end of all learning. An inclination moral joined with an ability intellectual to serve as the great aim and end of all learning. For Franklin, education and schooling were the primary bases of a good society. In 1750, in words that have obvious relevance today, Franklin wrote, "Nothing is of more importance to the public weal than to form and train up youth in wisdom and virtue. Wise and good men, good human beings, are, in my opinion, the strength of a state. Much more so than riches or arms, which under the management of ignorance and wickedness often draw on destruction instead of providing for the safety of a people." 1750. Something, again, that resonates here and around the world at this time. Democracy is, of course, much more than the state or the political system. It is, as John Dewey wrote in 1939, a way of life. A way of life he described as controlled by a working faith in the possibilities of human nature. The democratic faith in human equality is belief that every human being has the right to equal opportunity with every other person for development of whatever gifts he has. In this room are individuals from higher education, from business, from philanthropy, from neighborhood and from nonprofits and faith-based organizations, as well as pre-K to 12 educators, community members, and governmental officials. This conference, therefore, provides an opportunity to learn from each other, with different experiences. And it also provides an opportunity to discuss what should be done so that higher education community partnerships powerfully contribute to creating and sustaining inclusive, fair, and just societies in which democracy is a way of life for all. Thank you very much for your participation, and I look forward to learning with and from you over the next 2 days. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Before introducing my good friend and colleague, Associate Dean for the Social Sciences, Roger Smith, I would like to extend a few thank yous. And first, I want to acknowledge and thank the Netter Center's community, student, and faculty advisory boards for their exemplary support, dedication, and leadership. I would like to ask members of all our advisory boards to please stand. Don't be shy. Come on, stand up. You're all here. Stand up. Community, student. I want to particularly thank Barbara Netter and her late husband, Edwin Netter, for their remarkable vision and generosity that literally made this conference possible. I also want to thank the members of the National Advisory Board for providing additional financial support to host this two-day event. I would like to thank the Netter Center's many university and community colleagues for their creativity, collegiality, and commitment to partnerships for the public good. And I want to thank the Netter Center staff for their dedication, hard work, and unwavering commitment to social justice and equity. I'd like to ask members of the Netter Center staff to stand so they might be recognized for all they do. Please stand. All the members. I am truly, couldn't be more fortunate and lucky to have the colleagues I have with whom I work in the Netter Center team. Their dedication is extraordinary, as I said, and their commitment to the highest ideals and working to implement those ideals is inspirational to me every single day. So I want to personally thank you for that. And finally, I would like to thank Rita Hodges and Joanne Weeks. Rita is the assistant director and Joanne is the associate director of the Netter Center. And I want to thank them for their simply extraordinary effort, working beyond any reasonable call of duty to plan and organize this conference. Without them, I assure you, we would not be here. So thank you both very, very much. Steve Fluharty, the Dean of the School of Arts and Sciences, unfortunately couldn't be here with us today due to illness. But it's now a great pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague Roger Smith, who will formally welcome you to the University of Pennsylvania. Rogers M. Smith is the Christopher H. Browne Distinguished Professor of Political Science. As Associate Dean for the Social Sciences, Rogers oversees the departments of Anthropology, Criminology, Economics, History, and Sociology of Science, Political Science, and Sociology. Small task, Rogers, small task. He is founder of the Teachers Institute of Philadelphia, a wonderful university public school partnership on which I am proud to serve as a member of the Advisory Council. Rogers is president-elect of the American Political Science Association, and he's founder of the Andrea Mitchell Center for the Study of Democracy. Rogers is also recognized as an outstanding educator who has received the university's Lindback Award for Distinguished Teaching, the SAS's Award for Mentorship of Undergraduate Research, and the Provost Award for Distinguished PhD Mentoring and Teaching and Mentoring. So across the board in education, Rogers has been a leader and a recognized leader. So with that, please join me in welcoming Rogers Smith. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ira. I know Steve Fluharty greatly regrets, and I regret, that he can't be here this morning, but I'm so pleased to welcome all of you to this important gathering on behalf of the University of Pennsylvania and its School of Arts and Sciences. Whether you are a colleague here on campus, a community partner here in Philadelphia, or have traveled here from across the nation or world, we are honored to have you take part in a conference that celebrates both a physical entity here at Penn, the Netter Center for Community Partnerships, and an important idea that has had a widespread impact on learning, research, and the well-being of our communities. This conference has brought together an extraordinary group of scholars, practitioners, and community leaders who exemplify how the work of higher education community partnerships has grown and evolved over time. The School of Arts and Sciences has proudly supported the work of the Netter Center since the 1980s, first through the university's Office of Community-Oriented Policy Studies, and then the Penn Program for Public Service, each directed by Ira Harkavy. These offices laid the groundwork for the founding of the Netter Center for Community Partnerships as a university-wide center in 1992, administered through the School of Arts and Sciences and also reporting to the President's Center. Academically based community service, or ABCS, in which courses integrate service with research, teaching, and learning, has a long and proud tradition in undergraduate education at Penn, particularly in the School of Arts and Sciences. Last year alone, 70 of these courses engaged over 1,700 Penn students and faculty with the West Philadelphia community. Distinguished faculty from arts and sciences, a number of whom you will hear from during the conference, taught over half of these ABCS courses in fields spanning the humanities, natural sciences, and social sciences. Through ABCS, students and faculty from Penn work with children and adults in West Philadelphia to help solve critical campus and community problems. Such higher education partnerships with the community are essential to addressing our most significant social challenges. This type of work is really a hallmark of Penn and its efforts to integrate theory and practice. It's an approach that lies deep in our roots, dating back to Benjamin Franklin, and it's one that thrives today through the Penn Compact 2020, President Amy Gutman's vision for propelling the university forward in its core endeavors of teaching, research, and service with an emphasis on local engagement and the core values of inclusion, innovation, and impact. Before the proceedings get underway, I want to pay a special tribute on behalf of Steve, but also on behalf of myself, to the person who has been the heart and soul of Penn's community partnerships, as I noted, since the 1980s, and that is the dynamic Ira Harkavy. Ira's inspired leadership has been integral to the highly productive and mutually beneficial community partnerships here at Penn, and his and the center's work have inspired many similar efforts well beyond our own campus. His pioneering work has had a direct or indirect impact on communities far and wide. And let me say that when in the year 2000-2001, my wife Mary and I were considering moving from Yale to Penn, it was a talk by Ira at Yale that gave me an exciting vision of Penn as a place where community engagement was strongly valued. As Ira noted, since I've been here, I've put a lot of effort into a related endeavor, university public school partnership program, the Teachers Institute of Philadelphia. But Ira's advice and support were essential in getting that endeavor going and getting Walter Lick's Civic Scholars Program going and many others. All of us benefit from the fact that the Netter Center, under Ira's leadership, has made Penn internationally recognized as an institution that values and supports community engagement and civic outreach. So would you please join me in applauding Ira again for his extraordinary contributions. It is only fitting that the Netter Center celebrate its 25th anniversary with the ambitious agenda that's set forth. This conference is a wonderful opportunity for reflection, the sharing of best practices, spirited debate, and no doubt the spark of new ideas as we all come together. So on behalf of Steve Fluharty and the School of Arts and Sciences and the University of Pennsylvania, I wish you all an engaging and enlightening series of discussions. Again, a warm welcome to Penn. Thank you.
Thank you, Rogers, for that really warm and incredibly kind and wonderful welcome. So thank you very, very much. Thanks again. Without further ado now, what I'd like to do is to call up the opening panel to begin our first plenary session, and they'll be coming up right now, and we will proceed with the rest of the program. Thanks very much.
Good morning. Ole Peter Otterson, who is the Vice Chancellor of the Karolinska Institute in Sweden, had some unexpected travel delays, and so he is unable to be with us. And so I have been asked to step in as moderator for this opening plenary session. My name is Matt Hartley, and I'm a professor at Penn's Graduate School of Education, where I also serve as the Associate Dean. And a significant thread of my research has been to try and understand how different colleges and universities seek to enact their civic missions. And so it is a great privilege to be on the dais with four remarkable university leaders whose work I admire very much and who have done remarkable things advancing their own institution's civic missions. As Ira mentioned, the conference's theme is Higher Education and Community Partnerships for Democracy and Social Change. And our speakers have taken on this very difficult but important work in different institutional and even national contexts. And so I think that their reflections will give us some sense of both the common challenges as well as ways in which this work has to be adapted to fit particular circumstances. University community partnering is not just an expression of what Henry Louis Taylor calls liberal do-goodism. It is a better way to fulfill the mission of the university. It's a way that leads to excellence in research and powerful learning for students. Partnership work is also mutually beneficial, so its purpose is to produce new knowledge and to work to improve the lives of people in the community and in society. Joining us on the panel today, and their full bios are available online, are Nancy Cantor, who's Chancellor of Rutgers University Newark, Susan Herbst, who's President from the University of Connecticut, Ahmed Bawa, CEO of the Universities of South Africa, and Mark Rosenberg, President of Florida International University. Please join me in welcoming them. The format of this session will be that each speaker will have about 12 minutes to speak, and we have a timekeeper on the second row that you can pay attention to, and then there'll be a little bit of time at the end for us to engage in a dialogue with them.
Good morning. It isn't morning. Sorry, it isn't night, sorry. But I want to begin by saying, what a night. I thought it might be crowded, but we seem to have filled the place. Art Garfunkel, right, at Simon and Garfunkel's concert in Central Park.
Nice.
550 scholar activists. Something must be troubling you all. I want to thank Ira and his crew for inviting me here, and it's a great pleasure to be here, and it's an enormous privilege, and thank you so much. My talk is going to be drawing very heavily from the South African experiences, so but I hope that there'll be material that will be useful for all of us. Right? So the South African university system is experiencing one of its most serious crises since 1994, when democracy was ushered in one of the world's most fascinating struggles for human rights and social justice. While universities, both white and black, were a fundamental part of the apartheid infrastructure and an engine for apartheid's political, social, and economic architecture, they were also powerful engines for the galvanizing of young and talented minds in the creation of an anti-apartheid imagination, a post-colonial imagination, an imagination of hope and humanity. Many names leap to mind. Oliver Reginald Tambo, maths and science teacher. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, lawyer. Yusuf Dadoo, a medical doctor. Rick Turner, a foremost philosopher. Strini Moodley, an artist. And above all, the magical, indomitable Stephen Bantu Biko, who was a failed medical student. Universities were sites of great contestation. They educated engineers and physicists, and they educated social and political activists, very often in the same person. It was not unusual, of course, to see students grappling with the ideas of Marx and Fanon, Gandhi, Nkrumah, Paulo Freire, and also our South African scholars like Harold Walpe, Govan Mbeki, Moses Kotane, and many others. The interesting detail, of course, was that almost all of the learning about the big ideas wasn't happening in the classrooms. It was happening in constructed sites of engagement, what we might think of as higher education community partnerships for democracy and social change. Partnerships between left scholars and the trade union movement, scholars and students, scholars and community-based organizations. These became dynamic interfaces between the universities and the broad struggle to redefine and reconstruct the idea of humanity in apartheid South Africa. They became the great source of innovation and mobilization. Actually, we are now in the midst of new waves of complex, exciting, even devastating student uprisings. They represent powerful forces of engagement, throwing both the universities and the national state into chaos. The key issues raised by the students are deceptively simple in construction. They raise key issues of access and social mobility on the one hand, and the need for quality, decolonized higher education on the other. Not unfamiliar to societies around the world. Except for sporadic and scattered support for the student campaigns by individual scholars at several universities, this ongoing student campaign pits itself against the national state on the one hand and against the universities on the other. There is much rereading of Fanon and Biko and others, and a vibrant resurgence of black consciousness thinking. It is important to listen to what the students are saying. Students who have grown up in the post-apartheid era, who see the imagination of the 1994 democratic transition, what they call the Mandela transition, as constraining, if not even antithetical to the creation of a society that is more humane, more equal, more engaged in the life of its citizens. The demand for decolonized education is interesting. Cliched though it may be, the students are basically asking, are the 26 public universities in South Africa South African universities? And how would we know? This is really about the knowledge project of the South African higher education system. Thinking about the 25th anniversary of the Netta Center, I think about the evolution of university community partnerships and how they grew and then went into decline in South Africa. During the years of struggle, some of the universities allowed the intellectual space for experimentation with engagement between scholars and communities, as I indicated earlier, but had little resolve to fund them in any serious, sustainable fashion, even though they had such a large influence on the nature of the universities. These projects were therefore dependent on external soft funding from the foundations and internal development and international development agencies. When change came in 1994, and as donor funding dried up, the projects folded. There was little, if any, institutional defense of them. This is now, of course, in the post-apartheid era, right? So, here is what I would like to explore in the rest of this talk. The question, what is a South African university, is, in my view, completely tied to the question, what is the knowledge project of the 26 public universities? And I will argue, and I hope, that this in turn is tied to the issue of universities and engagement. We face unprecedented global challenges, unmitigated ravages of rising human consumption and their impact on climate change, global warming, the devastation of infectious and lifestyle diseases, the ease with which we create the other, and the connection of that with the rise of political violence. We witness massive global migrations and violent poverty accompanied by growing inequality. And frighteningly, we observe a growing erosion of democracy as elites establish and re-establish their hegemony over the economy, accompanied by a slide towards anti-intellectualism. And we witness the violence that flows from the degradation of ethical society. These are simultaneously intensely local and they are intensely global. Universities can't solve these problems by themselves, but they can't possibly sit on the sidelines either. They are social institutions with enormous resources, human capacity, and they are highly influential. And so universities around the world face challenges of legitimacy from time to time. They are often described as elite, as being unresponsive to societal challenges, as being focused on the needs of the political and economic elites, and so on. Very rarely are universities seen to be allies in the struggles for sustainable development, for the betterment of human life. They are seen by many as having been created by elites and to serve the purpose of those elites. It seems important, therefore, that universities deliberately shape themselves to address the creation of intellectual and social meshes between themselves and the struggles and aspirations of their communities. The question is, how are universities meant to do this? For this, I return to an idea that is eloquently captured in Knowledge for Social Change by Benson, Harkavy et al., an idea I've been exploring for a while, and I quote, "The higher education, democratic, civic, community engagement movement emphasizes that collaboration inside and outside the academy is necessary for producing knowledge that solves real-world problems and results in positive changes in the human condition." Of course, the critical element in here is producing knowledge, right? Because that's what we do. End of quote. It is not, sorry, the end of quote should have come before that. It is, it is not something good for the universities. It is not something that should simply be good for the universities to do. It rests at the very heart of the mandate of universities, the social institutions, as sites of production of knowledge, its application, and its dissemination. The student demand in South Africa for a decolonized education has to be interpreted in terms of how South African universities enter the global knowledge system, and there does exist such a thing, on their own terms, rather than on terms that are defined by the very powerful metropoles of scholarship. An example of this is a project that was done at Durban University of Technology, and I'm just going to describe that for you in a minute. A PhD graduate is appointed to a lectureship, receives a grant from the National Research Foundation, and decides that he's a biotechnologist, and he decides that what he's going to do is try to study how the process of fermentation had evolved in a local community just outside Durban. So how do you get at that, right? There's only one thing you can do. You can't actually sit at your screen and Google, it's not there. You can't possibly just go to the laboratory because you don't know what was done. So what you do is you strike up a partnership with the community. You go in, you work with the community, not just the academic, but the academic with a group of students, undergraduate and graduate, and basically speak to 4 generations of women. And you ask the women, how did you ferment food? The women describe what they did, notes are taken, go back to the laboratory and you test. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. And this, I've just seen the 1 minute science. Okay. So the point I want to come to very quickly is that 4 generations of women, different processes, publication is produced. A short while later, a response from a university in China saying, "Hello, we'd like to collaborate with you. We are doing the same thing." And so highly embedded knowledge within communities has been surfaced, has been codified, and has been put into the global knowledge system. And this is one way for us to begin to think about how universities can begin to seek legitimacy from those communities that were previously detached from them. Okay, so very quickly now, I just want to, because I really want to keep to the time. It seems to me at least that we have to think of the creation of university structures that allow for formal engagement to take place. What I mean by this is that it's not enough for us as universities to have simply a commitment to engagement, but that, like the Netter Center, you have to really begin to create structures that provide the basis for this engagement. Otherwise, what happens is that too much of engagement work is dependent on soft funding. And the moment that soft funding disappears, then so does the work in engagement. So for me at least, just to conclude, if we accept that engagement ought to be seen as the core, seen to be at the core of the university, since it contributes to the knowledge project, we must also see it as a powerful mechanism for institutional transformation. Universities must be designed to have multiple dynamic interfaces on the one hand, where humanities and technologies are reimagined, and where universities have to also create very porous boundaries so that there could be a free flow of ideas and capacities across these boundaries. And the recent exploration of universities as anchor institutions deserves serious theoretical investigation for the creation of a new generation of universities. We must answer the question, what are the implications of this for the conceptual and physical architecture of the 21st century university, if we accept that it needs to develop new and exciting relationships with its multiple communities, both internal and external, as engines for saving the earth and improving the quality of life of all. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I think the argument I'm making, just to conclude, is to say that we have to think about structured ways in which universities engage their communities. That is not enough to leave it to the passion of individuals like Ira Harkavy. Thank you so much.
Okay. I couldn't agree more with Ahmed that it's not enough to leave it to the passion of people like Ira, but it is enough for us all to take another moment to do an amazing applause for the leader of our movement. And for Rita and Joanne, who are hiding back there, but never too far. So I think it goes without saying that we are living in a time when taking democracy seriously could not be more urgent. On the one hand, we've got the aspiration, which for me, living and working in Newark, New Jersey, I go back to the roots of a great Newark rabbi, Joachim Prince, who spoke right before his dear friend Martin Luther King Jr. in the March on Washington, and he put forth what I take as the aspiration for taking democracy seriously, and that is that being a neighbor is not a geographic concept, that neighbor is a moral concept. So on the one hand, we have that aspiration, and on the other hand, we've got the reality of our communities. Charlottesville, Virginia, racism emerging in its strongest, most vivid form. In the recent elections in my state of New Jersey, incredibly racist posters, xenophobic, racist, every phrase you could imagine that is as far from the aspirations of Rabbi Prince as one could get. So what it suggests then is that we indeed have a call to unity, a call to democratic unity that really calls upon higher education to do what it fundamentally can but often doesn't do, to recognize the compelling interest of the diversity of our populations for democracy and prosperity. To take the diversity explosion that demographers like Bill Fry talk about all the time, and to envision it as an opportunity, not as a threat. Because envisioning diversity as an opportunity is at the heart of countering the hibernating bigotry we all, everyone in this room and beyond, has, as Rupert Nikas calls it, that isn't hibernating anymore. Why is that at the center of university community partnerships? It's at the center of that because those partnerships are an instantiation of taking diversity seriously as an opportunity, not as a threat. We have lots of precedents. Ahmed talked about so many wonderful precedents in South Africa. We have lots of precedents around the world. And many of them emerged right in the kinds of landscapes, the kind of divisive landscapes that we are talking about today. If I think about, in my field of social psychology, the extraordinary group dynamics work that came out after World War II, Kurt Lewin saying, if you truly want to understand something, try to change it. Well, that's really what we're all about. Ira got to do his Ben Franklin quote, so I get to do my Kurt Lewin quote. But if you think about the freedom school movement of the civil rights movement, and if you think today about my former colleagues in Flint, Michigan, who are out trying to say, we cannot let this kind of degradation of public health, of justice, of equity go on without speaking out and partnering. And that's what the global movement that Sure and so many in this room are trying to push. To say that we need to take democracy seriously, and higher ed has to be at the table, but it cannot view itself as the lone player at that table. So let me talk about Newark, New Jersey. Many of you know it. You probably know it for things that don't describe it in any way, really, that don't get to the heart of the opportunity that a global city like Newark, New Jersey represents. So when I think about what a higher education community partnership looks like, that is genuinely democratic in practice, what I think about is how do we free equitable voices? How do we bring diverse voices forth to the table to be taken seriously? Because that's at the heart of taking democracy seriously. So for us, we think about the Haynes Building in downtown Newark, sat empty for 30 years, an extraordinarily beautiful piece of architecture, right in downtown Newark, left to sit alone and dark for 30 years. And then Newarkers from all sectors came together and renovated it. And Rutgers University Newark was at the table, but with our community partners, creating a university community arts collaboratory. Because from my perspective, and all of my colleagues and the directors, Ann Englert and Victor Davson are sitting, where did Victor hide? Are sitting right here somewhere. So from our perspective, if we are going to genuinely create democracy in Newark, we have to do two things. We have to bring all the voices to the table and find a way to come together, a nuanced unity, not slurring over our differences, but bringing them forth and bringing our voices forth. So within that 50,000 square feet are university and community artists, students, every generation, public school students practically living there. And there comes things like the Newest Americans. You can go newestamericans.com and see it. Hijabi World, our Muslim students, after the rhetoric of the 2016 election, created this digital platform. Over 2 million hits on the New York Times lens, simply to get other people to walk in their shoes. Our center, gloriously created by the AAC&U and Kellogg Foundation and Newman's Own for Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. Storytelling with the Newark Public Library across the city, bringing out voices. The Humanities Action Lab, 26 universities now located, the network located in this building, thinking about states of incarceration, thinking about migration and global climate change, issues that bring forth equitable voice. But you can't have equitable voice alone unless you have equitable economic development, unless you have growth that spreads beyond a building to the whole city. So the mayor of Newark, who you'll hear from, I hope, later today, visionary mayor, high school principal, it helps, and poet, that really helps. Brought together all the big corporate and university eds and meds, any Prudential Center, anybody who would come to the table to bridge the two Americas that Newark, New Jersey represents. Increase local spend from $30 million a year to $200 million a year, hire 2020 Newarkers for jobs, and we can do it, and we will do it. But then there is that action research tradition, right? The broad bringing the voices to the table, the broad economic growth is one thing. The in-depth university community partnerships that tackle particular areas, in this case, African American brain health, thinking about the incredible disparity in statistics of brain health in Newark, New Jersey, white and black. But doing it 3 ways: creating evidence-based interventions, creating a collaborative infrastructure that will last well beyond the particular projects, and creating the next generation of STEM ambassadors from Newark, New Jersey. Strong, safe, healthy neighborhoods go together. Evidence-based interventions, using GIS, looking at where crime actually occurs in Newark, and it won't surprise you that it occurs on 20% of the streets, even though anybody reading about Newark in the Times or anywhere else would think it's everywhere on every corner. No, it's for particular people who are being harmed, and the people have to be at the table to intervene for public safety. The mayor, our School of Criminal Justice, our social workers, our psychologists, with every agency in the city, creating Newark street teams of community members to intervene on those streets, and creating a youth violence consortium to think about the future. And then, of course, we come to education. We start and we end with education, right? So pathways, interventions, figuring out what a university community-assisted school looks like. And of course, Ira and his colleagues are leading the way for us on that. And we are doing it with Shabazz High in Newark. We are doing it with the Opportunity Youth Network, the 7,000 youth in Newark, high schoolers who are not at their seats in high school, but have so much talent to contribute. But thinking about how Express Newark becomes a venue for pathways for 10th graders to then ultimately get to college. Thinking about what universities like ours can do to provide free tuition scholarships for any resident of Newark with a $60,000 adjusted family income or below, or who transfers from a community college, because that's where the vast majority of first-generation students will have their first taste of higher education. And then finally, and I have 1 minute left and I have 1 slide left. Yay! Finally, the point of all this is that if we or any of us are to succeed at taking democracy seriously, we need to create the next generation of change makers. And those change makers have to come from every corner of the diversity of our nation and our world, but as importantly, from every corner of our communities. And that will only happen if universities and communities come together. Thank you.
No slides. Thanks so much for having me here to represent the University of Connecticut. The Netter Center sets such a high standard for community engagement in higher education that we hope to get there someday. So earlier this fall, I found myself in that increasingly typical position. I had to explain to our state and our region what a public research university actually is. There's no need to rehash all the budget crunch details. We have a lot of that in public and private higher education. But in the midst of our particular budget crunch, big state and appropriations cut, possibly, that we faced, I had to tell our story better about what the university does. And we were facing budget cuts from our state that were unprecedented. And I think it even caught the advocates of that cut off guard when they realized what they were proposing. And one of the things that we learned during this crisis of our own budget is that a lot of people just don't understand the mission, the values of higher education, even though they send their own children to college and they live near universities and they go to sporting events and cultural events, but they don't really get what we do. People who have never sat across the table from a hostile lawmaker or newspaper editorial board occasionally think that I exaggerate. But we really were met with questions like, why do you even do research? Why do you have all these offices, all these structures to promote different programs? There really are people, including people in positions of influence and power in state legislatures and certainly in the federal government, who think that the only tools that a university needs to fulfill its missions are mission is desks and classrooms, blackboards, students and teachers, and yeah, even some of them think that dry erase boards are an unnecessary luxury. So what we realized from all of this fighting over our budget and trying to keep our state appropriations from too many cuts is that we've not been doing a great job telling our story. I don't think that's just true for the University of Connecticut. I think it's true for all of higher education, and I've been in public and private. It's easy in higher education to get our tunnel vision. When it comes to progress, we think we're doing a good or not so good job. We have metrics for our own industry. We look at rankings in our industry, and we look at what our peers think of us, and so that's the kind of world we live in. But either being hard on ourselves or patting ourselves on the back turns out to be a bad strategy in terms of engaging the larger community. And so one of the things I did with help of a lot of our university offices on campus and our deans is to put together a list, an actual single document, because I was asked for that, of all the ways the University of Connecticut works to make our communities better. Here, I'm putting it nicer than it was put to me, which was, so do you guys actually do anything for the region or the state? And a lot of this came from our friends in high places, so that's pretty worrisome. So needed this information from all of our schools, colleges, student groups, all of our research consortiums, our program offices, our grant-funded initiatives. I wanted a big document that showed what we do with regard to public service. And so people really hustled and got that together. It was well over 100 line items, and these were just the things that people could throw together over the course of a couple of days. And had we had a couple of months, it would have been thousands of lines. So we took this document, we shared it with lawmakers, policy analysts, with journalists, anyone who we thought might be interested. And the reaction universally was, "I never knew that you guys did all this." We just thought that you just, taught students and did some research, which is a kind of a black box to most people. Honestly, when I looked at the list, the scope of our impact across the university was pretty impressive. So even on the inside, we were a little taken aback by what we have accomplished. So just to give a few examples, and I know that a lot of you who have big and small institutions have these sorts of things, but here are the things that surprise a lot of our community members, our legislators, our local corporate leaders. For example, we have a speech and hearing clinic that provides exams and hearing aid services throughout Eastern Connecticut for free. We have a program where we have a school of pharmacy. Our pharmacy faculty provide guidance on prescription of antipsychotic medication to pharmacies across the state. We have a dental school. Our dental school performs millions of dollars of free care to the indigent every year. A pilot project in the poorest neighborhood of our capital city, that's Hartford, is helping residents there with everything from healthy eating to medication management. We have this great entrepreneurship program. It's boot camp for veterans, entrepreneurship. This is for disabled combat veterans, and that's led to launching of more than 100 businesses. Our medical students, medical school students volunteer in venues ranging from homeless shelters to clinics for migrant farm workers across the state. So I can go on and on. As I said, it's, this particular thing that we threw together, this spreadsheet, more than 100 lines. But one of the points that we emphasized when we were distributing this document and explaining it is that this kind of service is distinct from similar types of projects that, say, charitable organizations are known for. So we're trying to draw that distinction between what a public research university can do and what charity organizations are known for. And what we do is different because a research university is by nature extraordinarily different and unique. And all those projects that I mentioned have a research, teaching, training component. So let's take a real world example. We have a program called Project Cali. It's for content area literacy instruction, and that's through our School of Education. See, this is exactly why people don't understand what we do. I'm looking at this content area literacy instruction. That just doesn't make sense to a lot of even very sophisticated people. Anyway, Cali, this is a program that operates in middle school classrooms around our state, working with students who are struggling on basic reading comprehension. They're hands-on, concrete strategies for teachers, but they're also strategies developed by our researchers in the Department of Educational Psychology in the School of Education. And as those strategies are implemented, our researchers, of course, learn ways to make them better. This is why community engagement for us is not just something we say that we do. It's an integral part of our existence as a university. The data compiled from these projects is what produces new scholarship, which in turn enables enhanced engagement with the community. So we had to explain that cycle to people, and it's a little hard to understand if you're not living and breathing higher education all the time. Scholarship, I'd even say, is what converts service into engagement. Scholarship creates a reciprocity between the university and the community that improves both at the same time. So when we talk about community engagement as a vehicle for democracy, this is what we mean. We're not meant to be benevolent saviors acting upon objects of, with condescension or with pity. We're engaged as partners with our communities on discovering mutually beneficial ways of living and learning. So again, a little hard to articulate out there to a broader audience, again, even to very educated people and lawmakers, but it needs to get done because it looks like a kind of a black box to them. So it's really not the kind of thing that can be done if you think of a university as classrooms and chalkboards and just teacher and student. So let me elaborate a little bit more on this point because I think it's critical. A university enables social change through engagement, not only because of its research function, but because of its very nature as a university. And I think both previous speakers talked about that essence of what a university is or a college is. You've heard a lot for your whole careers about multidisciplinary work and cross-disciplinary work at a university, so much so, and we're so doing this already that it seems odd to even use those words anymore. But of course, the university is a multidisciplinary institution or a college, and this aspect is it's critical when it comes to our role in community engagement. Again, explaining our breadth and our integration with each other that people don't understand. Let me give you another real-world example because I have a lot of them. Remember, because I have the spreadsheet, so it's gotten a lot more easy. It's gotten a lot easier for me to articulate all of this in public. So 2 years ago, a group of our students and faculty launched something called the Immigration Detention Service Project at York County Prison here in Pennsylvania. So this is one of the prisons where people seeking asylum in the United States are held while their cases are pending, and sometimes this takes years. So the service project that we developed brings together students and faculty from our law school, our School of Social Work, and also our Institute for Latino, Caribbean, and Latin American Studies. So this means that refugees at this prison have, in one group of faculty, staff, and students, services in translation, in expert testimony, in preparation of their cases, and in courtroom advocacy. Already, this service project has resulted in numerous refugees being granted asylum seeker status and released from prison. In only its second year, the project has already received the Light of Liberty Award and the Pennsylvania Immigration from the Pennsylvania Immigration Resource Center. So it's a small but I think instructive example of the university's full role in engaging a community. In addition to the specific services being provided, this involves research for future scholarship, of course, by faculty members, and practical training for the students in all those fields I mentioned, law, social work. So it's not something that people do because it looks good on their resume, or even because they feel passionately about the issue. This is something that we do because it's what universities do, the very nature of our mission, our inherent mission again. Now, I'll say that just because this work comes naturally doesn't mean that it comes easily. There are many ways the university can thwart its own basic functions. We're known for our territorialism. I think it's a little overblown, but we have that. We do have an insistence on using some methods or concepts that we're tied to, in many cases that we developed ourselves. And we're not always great internal communicators. But they're far from being the only potential hindrances that we have in doing this kind of community engagement work. It's essential to find ways to reduce those hazards. We're trying to do a lot of that at UConn. And we found real value in creating an institutional advocate for engagement. And I know that a lot of you at your institutions have this already. But for us, it was back in 2003. We began what was then called the Provost Public Engagement Forum. So this brought together faculty and staff with an interest in the practice and the development of community outreach and engaged scholarship. The forum brought a lot of positives to us, and one of the major initiatives that grew out of it is our own Office of Public Engagement. So we determined that this is such a critical part of the mission of our university that it needed a full-time office, it needed a director, it needed staff. But it's important to underscore what the office is not. It's not another layer of bureaucracy between the university and our engagement efforts. And I've seen that happen at other institutions, and it's something that you have to be very careful about. It's not an exercise in empire building with one office trying to steer every single aspect of a university's engagement. I think that's a mistake that a lot of institutions make. It's, we like the idea of maybe if we centralize that we'll be more effective somehow, we'll be able to track everything. And I think that if you try to do that, you might overwhelm yourself and lose track of the fact that universities and colleges, even small ones, are pretty decentralized places, and that works okay in a lot of ways, even if you're trying to centralize your understanding of it and your operations to some extent. So we have this Office of Public Engagement, and it's a permanent voice, a structure within the university, advocating, promoting, innovating within our general sphere of efforts in community engagement. So promoting partnerships, developing programs, fostering, very, very importantly, a university-wide attitude that puts scholarship and service learning, community outreach at the center of what we do. So just another quick example. So this semester we opened a new campus in downtown Hartford, Connecticut, our state capital. Hartford has tremendous structural challenges. A lot of northeastern cities do. But this represents for us an unprecedented level of opportunity for engagement to actually build a campus in one of the areas that needs the most attention. It took funding. And as all of you know, that you can only do so much with the resources you have. And you still really do have to teach students in classrooms with blackboards and do all that. So it's got to be scaled to what you can manage. But we were able to build a new campus downtown, to open it. The people of Hartford have not just been waiting for the University of Connecticut cavalry to come over the hillside. And, there are programs and initiatives from the neighborhood level that have been in place for some time. So people have been trying to help themselves, even in a city that's near bankruptcy. It does very little good to just assume that our students and faculty are just going to figure out how to best engage with that community with no help. And it can be harmful to our relationships with our community partners if we approach our work in a kind of seat-of-the-pants manner. So through a program called the Yukon Cities Collaborative, our Office of Public Engagement has become a one-stop clearinghouse for service opportunities in Hartford. So trying to work with all the organizations that are already on the ground, trying to fit into that and also bring our resources to it. So volunteering, internships, opportunities to join established networks and partnerships, forge new ones. It's all there in this Office of Public Engagement. So it may seem like a small thing until you contemplate the prospect of actually starting off in a brand new city for a university with no planning and organization really before that. So having one office to advocate for that and be there for the general principle is a great thing. Oh my gosh, I have 1 minute left. So I'd never want to propose one model as a university, as a universal solution that'll work for every college or university, but I do know that the mission of community engagement is better served through a strong, consistent institutional presence that is physical. So, once again, just underscoring what people before me have talked about, we have to do a better job explaining what the essence of a university is and how that is precisely tied to community engagement. We've got a lot of work to do on that articulation, even if we have great programs to brag about, and I know that a lot of you do. It's going to be, for the next decades to come, all about not just justifying the existence of especially public colleges and universities, but explaining to people what they are and why community engagement is central to what they are. So thank you.
So good morning. I'm Mark Rosenberg, president of Florida International University in Miami. A couple of weeks ago, I was informed that the Secretary of Transportation of the United States was going to visit Miami, and she was only going to make 2 stops. One was to meet with transportation officials in the county, and the second was to inspect an accelerated bridge construction urban transportation center that we have at our public university. So when I got further information about her visit to to meet with transportation officials, I did a quick tally. And it turned out that of the 10 individuals she was meeting with, 6 were FIU graduates. They were all in senior positions of responsibility in the community. And I share with you that anecdote to give you a little bit of the flavor of who we are and what we're up to. But first, I want to thank Ira for the invitation. Congratulations to the Netter Center. 25 years, the best I know, it's maybe hard to believe, is still yet to come. So Ira, thank you so much. I want to spend a moment on the question of who we are, of how we think, and then give you some quick examples. It was mentioned earlier, Ahmed, I think, mentioned that context matters. So for us in Miami, geography and demography are our destiny, and we understand that. There are 6 million people now in the metropolitan statistical area, and which is the 3-county area of Miami, Broward, and Palm Beach. And there are about 1,000 new people a day coming into Florida now. And the recent calamity in the Caribbean has already sent about 150,000 individuals from Puerto Rico to live in Florida. FIU itself, the latest number is we currently have 890 new students for the spring semester, and we expect when it's all done, there'll be 1,000 from Puerto Rico who unfortunately are not able to continue their educations there or don't want to. The Kauffman Foundation recently indicated that we were the #1 city in terms of startups. Now, but we don't do so well in terms of scale-ups. But there's an incredible, if you will, entrepreneurial effervescence there. In part, perhaps that's because we have the highest percentage of foreign-born residents of any city in the United States. Shouldn't be a surprise then that if I were to characterize, and I'm a political scientist, our community is characterized by extreme fragmentation. There are, at latest count, maybe 40 municipalities plus a county government and 46 high schools. Each county commissioner, the 13 county commissioners, are essentially sovereigns for their own district, single-member districts. So this creates a really interesting challenge for a public university in a community where it wants to be responsible. And then the other thing is, as we all know, household income is stagnant. Income inequality is growing. We've been compared in terms of income inequality to Mexico City, in terms of income inequality, and the traffic congestion, we've been compared to Istanbul. And so, there's an interesting benchmarking that you can do about this incredible community that we live in. Our university is 56,000 students, 85% minority, largely Hispanic and African diaspora. 52% of our undergraduates are first generation. 85% of our students work full or part-time. And unlike many universities, in fact, most that probably we graduated from, our students, by and large, tend to organize their studies around their work, not their work around their studies. So that presents, again, some fascinating challenges. And from that viewpoint, we've done a lot of soul searching about what's going on nationally in terms of students and what's important to us. And I can tell you that nowadays it's important to meet students where they are, not where you want them to be. That's increasingly important and challenging. And certainly in our case, the traditional benchmarks which we might use really don't work. Our values, what matters? We see ourselves as forward-facing. We are less than 50 years old. And forward-facing means we shouldn't be benchmarking against the past. Benchmarking against the past means, do we really want to look like a top 20 university looked like 20 years ago? Or do we have to figure out what's going to happen and the world of work as it's going to be, not as it was? We're willing to take responsibility. We are, we argue that we are very student and learner-centric, although I'm trying to change the discourse to be increasingly we're learner-centric, because while an individual may not want to be a student, they're going to have to be a learner if they're going to survive in this world of IoT, automation, and the radical transformation of the structure of work in the next 20 years. We do obsess on impact. The research on the best nonprofits in the country shows that they obsess on impact. They want to make sure that they are making a difference. And finally, in terms of that, we see ourselves as a solution center as a university. We want to close the gaps. We understand that there's an intimate relationship between education gaps, opportunity gaps, income gaps, and that's very, very visible in our Miami. As a consequence, we have developed an aggressive engagement strategy for our community. And that aggressive engagement strategy, frankly, while there is strong leadership for that at the top, we found on doing a serious survey that in spite of the fact that we visualized ourselves as a leading urban public research university, when we did the survey in 2009, 2010, we found over 700 projects, activities, engagements by our faculty and by our professional staff in the community. I'm really proud of the fact, for instance, that one of our interns who he had an internship for 4 months at the city of Miami Beach. Now, after 4 months, he got a full-time job in public works in the city of Miami Beach to help address the issue of sea level rise, a gentleman by the name of Carlos Tamayo. Because in Florida, it is the state government has essentially mandated, and the governor has taken as a central point of his work. He said he continually reminds us his first priority is jobs, his second priority is jobs, and his third priority is jobs. And so as a consequence, while we can talk about the 1,000 miracles of the research that we do, and I'll spend a moment on that, we first and foremost have to talk about not just the incredible education that our students are getting, but the great opportunities that they have when they graduate. That gets measured and benchmarked against the other 11 public universities in the state university system. Not just whether they're fully employed and how they're employed, but also what their starting salaries are. And really, I think that speaks to the broader challenge that we have, ultimately, of the convergence between vocational education and baccalaureate education into the creation of a 21st century workforce, which I would submit, particularly those of us in public universities, are going to have to spend a lot more time on, or we're going to be out of business. So to deal with this issue of engagement, we first of all conceptualized how can we work more closely with the Miami-Dade County Public Schools. Now, many of you come from communities where the school district is heavily fragmented, 6 or 7 school boards, different regulatory frameworks, but we have the luck of having a consolidated school system. One school board, one superintendent, 350 schools, 360,000 students, and traditionally we had dealt with the public schools as a secondary or derivative matter, and our dean of education had the primary responsibility. But when we realized that in essence we were cursing the darkness by not having the students that we thought we deserved, we realized that 35% of the teachers in the Miami-Dade County Public Schools are FIU graduates. And that 37% of the administrators are FIU. We had nobody to blame but ourselves. And so we created a partnership with the superintendent. Actually, we've spoken about this at the Netter Center before. That is called Access, Achieving Community Collaboration in Education Student Success. And there we were in the very first meeting, the superintendent and his team. I was sitting there, and I had my team, vice presidents, deans, everybody was in the room, and we said, how are we going to frame this partnership? And the superintendent had clarity, which matters in this business. He said, we need to obsess on student achievement. And once he framed it in those terms, it was easy for us to really take on a set of initiatives that I won't describe here to deepen the collaboration, and in particular to enable us to go in to a number of low-performing schools and to develop intense partnerships with private sector support, which essentially sent the message that at FIU, we expect all students to graduate and to be eligible to attend the university, which obviously in many schools was not a message that our students were receiving. Not that we really believed that that would be either possible or necessary, but what we wanted to do is raise the expectations of our students in the Miami-Dade County Public Schools that, yes, if they worked hard, they could get a college education, regardless of the zip code of their birth. We also have established a deep partnership with Florida Power and Light. Florida Power and Light is one of the major utilities in the state. They came to us and said, we want more FIU graduates. And we said, well, we want internships, because we know if a student has an internship, they have a 60 to 65% likelihood of getting a job with that company at a $12,000 to $13,000 salary increase. So FP&L said, well, when we hire your students, that we start them off in the call center. And we said, okay, let's put a call center at FIU. So today, Florida Power and Light in the state of Florida has 4 call centers. One of those is at FIU. They offer students part-time jobs, explicit training on customer service, management of data, networking, things like that. And about half of those students, when they complete their part-time job there, when they graduate, will get offered a fast-track position in management, which of course helps us to address those goals of taking responsibility, not just for the education, but facilitating great job opportunities. And then finally, I wanted to mention our program, Neighborhood Help. Dr. Joe Greer is here. He's going to be speaking a little bit later on. But Neighborhood Help is essentially trying to turn upside down the notion of how community health gets done. Through our medical school, our nursing school, our public health school, through other units, we go into neighborhoods, low-income neighborhoods, do a census, and get our students to be in those households for the full 4 years of their training, start to finish, because 75% of sickness is socially determined. And if we can keep people out of the low-income families out of the emergency rooms, they got half a shot to have the opportunities that we talk about, but we don't do much about. And basically, one of the keys to neighborhood help is we actually listen to what's going on to people in the neighborhoods about what they need and attempt to respond in that way. So finally, let me just say that in this, I want to urge you to have high expectations of yourself in terms of what we can do, and to have high expectations, set high expectations for partners in the community. Ultimately, universities are clusters of talent. We are agents of well-being, to echo an earlier theme, but we have the obligation to close gaps, to use the blessings of our talent to help our communities get better, get stronger, to become more resilient. And that's precisely what we are doing at FIU. Ultimately, universities are communities of memory and hope. And if we can help to create hope, and if we can find the way to bridge the gaps that will allow hope to happen, we'll leave it much better than we found it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. According to my watch, we are at time. However, I feel like I would be remiss as moderator if I did not allow at least a couple of questions from the audience. So, yes, please.
Hi, thank you, everyone. That was very enlightening. My name is Laura Quiros. I'm an Associate Dean of Academic Affairs and Associate Faculty at Adelphi University. And I'm sitting here as a leader in the Academy, and maybe Dr. Bawa, this is for you or for all of you, but I'm really struggling with the idea of community partnerships in predominantly white institutions. I think there's an ideology attached to that. And so I'm always conscious of working with students and organizations going out into the community. And I do a lot of work on our implicit curriculum, on decolonizing the classroom and spaces within the university. And so I'd like, my question really is there work towards that, sort of unpacking this rhetoric of collaboration and engagement so it's not from just a white Euro lens? And what do you do to sort of decolonize the ideology of predominantly white institutions before going into community so we're actually seen as collaborators and not experts?
I think that's a great question, and it was a real problem in South Africa in the early years, where engagement was really seen as an opportunity to get privileged kids into underprivileged, backgrounds to kind of broaden their sense of purpose and so on, But of course, it's ideologically laden. I mean, very seriously ideologically laden, and that's why, from my point of view, at least, this isn't simply about kind of the university playing a role in helping what's going on outside. It's really about saying, how do you integrate community engagement into the knowledge project of the universities, so that it's driven by what emerges out of the engagement between the communities and the university. So it's not something that the university is determining up front. I mean, one of the things that I didn't have time to talk about was, how you might think about applications-based knowledge projects which can't be defined by the university. They have to be defined in partnership, And immediately you do that, that changes the agenda. But it does require strong ethical frameworks and so on. And you have to go through that process. Having moved from historically white universities to a historically black university in South Africa, for me it became a very easy thing, and Dr. Darren Lawton is here, and we worked together there. Became a very easy thing because all of a sudden the students weren't going into, from privileged backgrounds into, the challenge was now how to get these students to be social agents, because they were going back to their own communities, which were hugely kind of under pressure. So it does depend on the context, I think, that the university finds itself in, but I think the critical issue is that the projects can't be defined by the university. The projects have to be defined by a collective, and that has to be the center of the debate, I think, the challenge at least.
Other questions?
We don't have predominantly white institutions.
Yeah, we're doing very well in terms of undergraduate diversity. Graduate student diversity and faculty diversity, not so much. So, but the specific question is how we send students, faculty out into communities of color, and I'm still a little bit unclear about what the precise question is. It's true. I don't think there's, I'm very straightforward about this kind of thing. I mean, we try to understand partnerships that exist already, try to understand people's struggles, be open to listening to people. But I think you can over-complexify this stuff, too, to the point where you just debilitate yourself. yeah, I mean, as a white faculty member or white student, I mean, you can only, tie yourself up in that so much before you, again, start to get so much in your head that you're not doing the actual work of, again, trying to understand people, trying to understand their goals, developing metrics for success together. So, that's where we're at. And I have to say, it's an empirical question. It goes really well for us. I mean, our opening of the Hartford campus, which is a, predominantly African-American, Latino city and neighborhood, that's gone incredibly well. And people are very excited to work with us. So it's an empirical question. And if you're having a struggle with that, then yeah, you've got to rethink whether you're really being open, whether you come in there with some sense of noblesse oblige, or whether you're really trying to get into what a community needs and what you need with regard to developing your own university and programs, again, so that you could be more effective. But, I think in higher education, we do have a tendency to overthink at that high level, and it can be debilitating.
Yeah, my name is Pam Fredman. I'm the president of International Association of Universities. I think this area is very, very important to work together, and it's not very developed in Europe. And in my country, Sweden, it's not developed. But I have a question, and that is, how do you get people to get involved? Because if you are in the academia, you have the faculties, they ask, I'm not paid for this, I'm paid for research and I'm paid for education. If you go to the community, they have full-time job and I don't have any extra money, I'm not paid for this. How does it work? How could we inspire from both sides that this is a part of the job?
Go ahead, please. I think these may work in front of us now.
Thanks. I'll take a quick stab at that. I'm sure others have things to say as well. I think there are two things from each side. One is that we have not been good as universities in rewarding publicly engaged scholarship. And there's a growing movement in the United States, Imagining America. Tim Eatman has done a huge amount of work on this, on how do we create reward systems that really genuinely put incentives in promotion and tenure, for example, for faculty who do high-impact scholarship. And if you go back to the action research tradition, this is real work. This is work that should be rewarded. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, from a community perspective, one of the most important things is that universities are not very good at sharing resources and actually putting resources into community-based organizations. Rather than just seeing ourselves as partnering, actually put the resources, create 501c3s or nonprofit organizations that are community and university jointly, so that when external funding comes in, it goes to the bottom line of people who are in the community, rather than simply that the university has partnered. That's great. But partnering then with people who, as you said, have full-time jobs and few resources is not going to help. So one of the things that we're trying to do in Newark is that all our work is collaborative across sectors with community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, citizens groups, and the resources go right there to really make it realistic.
Yeah, just to... I think we've, there's a whole evolution of thinking around this. So I want to just indicate, in South Africa there was the Higher Education Act, which governs the public higher education system, thinks about three roles of the university: teaching, learning, research, teaching and learning, and engagement. Actually, it's certainly at the Durban University of Technology. We've adopted another approach, which is to say that engagement shouldn't be seen as a third pillar. There are just two pillars: it's teaching and learning and research. And that engagement should really cut across the whole. And that, so that immediately removes the idea that we need to find funding for engagement. It should really be fundamentally built into the core functions of the university.
Yeah. But just one last thing is, you know, not everybody at the university is good at this or should be doing it. You know, I mean, you know, you got to look around, do a surveillance, you know, do a surveillance of what your strengths is, where the areas are that you can make a difference. But I mean, let's face it, you know, there's a lot of faculty, staff, and students who are not cut out for this kind of work. They do good work at the university. They teach students, and that's fine. But you know, I wouldn't spin wheels too much on everybody has to see their work in light of engagement and all that. You know, there's only limited time on Earth, you know, to get stuff done.
Right. One size will not fit all here. And so I think there's several keys. First of all, there needs to be an organizational culture that will support that. And that, I think, without leadership saying this is important, it's going to be harder to work. That's one. Two is that that ultimately in the 21st century, I think we've got to do a lot better job in blurring the lines between boundaries. And we don't do that very well in higher ed. But if you're willing to blur the lines between public and private, between urban and rural, between, if you will, knowledge and application, then that makes it a lot easier to do. And then finally, build win-win-win relationships. In other words, this is not noblesse oblige. This is a function of where your strengths and your talents are and the commonality of interests with others. And I don't care what community you're in, you always can find people outside who have a commonality of interests that can create an incredible space for innovation and productivity. And so, but it's got to be win-win-win. You don't necessarily do it as a service. You do it as an opportunity to enhance the partnership and on both sides, which means that there has to be a strong definition of what your institutional interests are, and we shouldn't be apologetic for that on one hand, but insist that your partner has a strong definition of what they need out of the partnership. That creates the clarity that can lead to greater intentionality that will help. That's it.
We're done. I would like to just briefly express my appreciation to the panel for their thoughts. I think it was an excellent introduction, both underscoring the importance of higher education finding ways to have a place at the table, but at the same time being open to the complexities of the communities that they're trying to partner with. And so I hope you'll join me in thanking them for their comments.
I also want to thank the panel for doing such a tremendous job and kicking off the meeting so well. And I want to really raise also that they've raised some tremendously significant issues that we'll be discussing in our thematic panel. So again, one more round of applause, please. And then I'd like to introduce quickly Rita Hodges. And Rita will indicate some logistic questions as you head into your next session. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. We'll be getting started in just a few minutes for our first round of concurrent thematic panel sessions. Just a few quick logistical notes. One of the sessions is right here in this room. That's community-based participatory action research across the globe. On the second floor in Ben Franklin room, we have the community health panel, and in the Golkin room is the arts and culture panel. On the third floor is where you'll find the Grisky room, where we have media and new technologies, and the class of 47 room, where we have the community leadership panel. One of our wonderful panels is just a quick walk outside to the Arch building. There's some Netter Center staff members to show you along the way for our college access panel. We'll be getting back in this building, everyone on the main floor, in the ground floor for lunch, where many of our tables are reserved, but we have additional seating and live streaming on the main floor here. Just a final note is that there is a URL at the bottom of your agendas where you can find all of the speaker bios and other materials for the conference. So thanks again and enjoy the thematic panels.